Olama was not born cursed, nor did she grow up in shadows. She was once the jewel of the village, the daughter of a renowned hunter, and a mother known for weaving cloth so fine it shimmered like water. Her beauty was like the golden light of dawn, soft, glowing, impossible to ignore. Suitors came from across the region with gifts, songs, and promises. The elders often said her bride price could build a palace, and no one would question it. Her first marriage was to a noble farmer from Obolo. He was strong, humble, and deeply in love with her. But on the third night after their wedding, he was found cold in his bed, his eyes wide open, his body untouched. His death was a mystery. The elders performed rituals, but no answers came. He had no illness, no wounds, no reason to die, except that he had slept beside Olama. The village mourned. Olama wept. Her family buried the man with honor. No one suspected her, at least not yet. 2 years later, after mourning and prayers, she married again. This time it was the son of a wealthy palm oil merchant. He was young, full of laughter, and eager to start a life with her. But by the 5th night of their union, he too was dead, without struggle, without sound, just gone. Whispers began. Some said she was cursed, others believed she was possessed. A few feared she was a spirit sent to punish men for some forgotten sin. Her father died shortly after, and her mother followed not long after that. Grief hung around her like a second skin, but even grief could not hide her beauty. Even mourning could not dim her glow. Olama buried 2 husbands before the age of 25. And yet men still came, driven by either love, lust, or the foolish belief that they would be different. Each one met the same fate. Found cold in the early hours, no marks, no answers. By her 4th marriage, fear had taken root in Ugboma. Children were told not to look her in the eye. Women crossed the road when she passed. Some said she had made a pact with something deep in the forest. Others swore she slept with a demon, and it claimed any man who dared touch her. Her compound grew quiet. Birds stopped singing there. No dogs barked near her gate. Yet Olama remained. She did not beg for love, nor did she chase away those who offered it. She lived quietly, tending to her garden, feeding stray goats, and visiting the shrine every new moon. The priests refused to touch her case. The oracle said her path was shrouded in fire and blood. No one dared ask what that meant, and still she did not age. While her peers bore children and lost their youth to time and toil, Olama remained the same. Her skin glowed, her eyes sparkled, her steps were light. It was as if time bowed in her presence. Some swore she had stopped aging the day her first husband died. Others believed death had kissed her and refused to let go. Then one dry season, after many years of silence and solitude, a stranger arrived in Ugboma. He was not like the others. His name was not known. His tongue was strange. His clothes were tattered. His feet were bare. He walked with the limp of a man who had once run from something terrible. The villagers called him Onye Ara, the Madman, because he talked to trees and slept under the sky, even when it rained. He laughed at nothing, sang to no one, and danced like his soul burned from within. No one paid him mind. They threw him scraps, chased him from their huts, warned their children to stay away. But the madman did not leave, and then one day, without warning, he walked straight into Olama's compound. The villagers watched from behind their fences, eyes wide, breath held. He knocked on her gate, then pushed it open. He did not ask permission. He simply entered, singing some broken song in a language older than the hills. They feared he would not last the night, but he did. The next morning, the sun rose like it always did. But the sky felt different, the air held a hum, and from Olama's compound, smoke rose from the hearth, as if she had cooked for two. The villagers waited for a scream, for a funeral, for another death. But the madman lived, and not just lived, he stayed. He danced in her yard, drank from her calabash, followed her to the stream, and spoke to her as if they were equals. The villagers were baffled. Some called it a trick. Others said the gods had finally sent her match. But everyone watched, everyone waited, for if this madman did not die, then perhaps the curse had a weakness. Or perhaps what lived in Olama had finally found something it could not consume. Days turned into weeks, and the madman remained. The villagers of Ugboma, once content with superstition and whispered fear, now found themselves pulled into a quiet obsession. They watched the compound from afar. Children climbed trees to catch a glimpse. Old women muttered under their breath, tying protective charms to their doorposts. Yet no one dared confront the woman or the man who now sat in the eye of their old dread. The madman, whose name no one knew and whose origin no one asked, was a mystery stitched with laughter. He sang at dawn, danced under the sun, and spoke to spirits only he could see. He fetched water from the stream barefoot, spoke in riddles to chickens, and recited proverbs in the language of dreams. Yet Olama, the woman feared to be a curse, treated him with neither disdain nor fear. She cooked for him. He ate from her hands. She washed his torn clothes and hung them beside hers, like they belonged to the same world. There were no screams in the night, no mourning in the morning, only the odd sight of a woman who had buried 5 husbands now tending a garden, with a madman who smiled at clouds. The elders held a private meeting in the shrine. They burned camwood and cracked kola nut. They summoned the oracle, who stared into a bowl of water and shook her head slowly. "This is not a man," she said, "and she is not just a woman. Their spirits know each other. Their story is older than your questions." The chief priest asked what must be done. "Nothing," the oracle replied, "for what is waking now cannot be stopped by sticks or chance. Let the cursed and the mad walk together. Let the gods finish what they started." Meanwhile, Olama's compound, once shrouded in dread, began to change. Flowers bloomed where once weeds thrived. The air smelled of roasted yam and palm oil. Birds returned to the trees around her hut. Her laughter, long buried beneath grief, now danced freely in the wind. But at night the ground spoke in silence. The madman would sometimes sit by the fire, still as a grave, his eyes fixed on the darkness beyond. On some nights he would draw symbols in the sand, circles within circles, lines broken like lightning strikes. Olama would sit beside him, unmoving, her eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. Neither spoke, neither moved. But something passed between them, something deeper than language. The villagers began to murmur anew. Some said the madman was not truly human, that he was a spirit in flesh sent by the river gods to test the limits of her curse. Others believed he was her final punishment, a madness she had summoned to consume herself. A few, the oldest and most afraid, whispered that the two of them were cursed in love, that they had loved each other in a time before time, defied the gods, and were doomed to find each other in every life and die trying. One moonless night, the air grew thick, and thunder rumbled without rain. In the forest surrounding Ugboma, the drums of the unseen began to beat. The madman stood suddenly, walked into the forest barefoot, and disappeared. Olama did not follow. Instead, she sat before her shrine, whispering to a bundle of white cloth buried in red thread. No one saw her that night, but the wind changed direction, and the animals of the bush grew restless. By morning, the madman returned, his eyes wild, his skin streaked with ash and blood. He carried nothing, yet his presence weighed heavier than any object. He sat beside Olama's door and began to hum, the same way he did when he first arrived. 3 days passed, then something broke. A man named Okafor, bold and foolish, who had once courted Olama before fear snatched his courage, decided to confront the couple. He believed the madman had no power and that Olama had merely found a trick to delay the curse. He walked to her gate with a charm in his hand and hate in his heart. The villagers watched, some praying silently, others hiding behind trees. Okafor shouted his insults, calling the madman a fraud and Olama a killer. He stepped forward, daring them to deny the deaths, to deny the fear that still stained the soil of her courtyard. The madman stood. He did not raise his voice. He did not attack. He simply looked into Okafor's eyes and laughed. The laugh was not cruel. It was not angry. It was the sound of thunder cracking open the sky, the sound of memory returning after lifetimes. Okafor staggered back. His charm burst into flames in his hand. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He fell to the ground, trembling, eyes wide with terror, as if he had seen something no mortal should ever see. He ran from the compound, never to speak again. From that day on, the people stopped watching. They stopped whispering. Fear shifted into reverence. Some called them cursed, others chosen. But no one denied now that something sacred or profane lived within that compound. The madman and the widow remained together, and still no man died. Time drifted slowly over Ugboma, like the harmattan dust that settled on roofs and memories. Yet in the compound where the feared widow and the wandering madman lived, time seemed to move differently, like it circled rather than passed. For the first time in years, no funeral followed the name of Olama. No sudden deaths, no fresh graves, and the village, though still cautious, began to breathe again. But peace in places built on ancient secrets does not last. One night, when the moon refused to rise, and the sky sat like a lid over the village, the priest's youngest daughter woke screaming. Her skin was cold, and her eyes rolled to the whites. She spoke in a voice not her own, chanting riddles in a tongue no one had taught her. She clawed at the earth and pointed toward the east, toward Olama's home. By morning, she remembered nothing, but the villagers remembered everything. That day, the elders summoned Olama once more. For years, they had avoided her compound, convinced that silence was safer than confrontation. But now the signs had returned. They needed answers, and this time they would not leave with riddles. When they arrived, the madman was sitting beneath the ojia tree, carving lines into the dust. Olama stood behind him, eyes distant, hands folded. The women among the elders looked at her with fear, thinly veiled as respect. The men looked with suspicion, aged by too many buried sons. The chief elder stepped forward, voice strong but cautious. He asked nothing of the madman. His words were for Olama alone. You carry something not of this world. It has claimed blood. And though this madman walks beside you and does not fall, others are not spared. We saw the signs. The girl spoke your name in a tongue we buried with our ancestors. What truth hides beneath your calm? Olama said nothing at first, but her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with old knowing. Then, without warning, she turned and walked into her hut. When she returned, she carried an object wrapped in cowrie-laced cloth and bound with palm string. It was not large, but the weight it carried was immense. she placed it gently on the ground before them, and as the wind shifted, the smell of camwood and something older, earthier, filled the air. The madman did not look. He simply hummed. Olama knelt beside the bundle and began to speak. Not to the elders, but to the ground. She told the story of a woman who had once defied a god, a woman who had loved a mortal man deeply. She begged the gods to let her remain with him forever. But the god she served was jealous and ancient, a spirit of desire and vengeance. In her plea, she broke her vow. She hid her love, bore his child in secret, and named the boy a son of men. But the god found out, and the punishment was brutal. Her lover was turned to stone, her child cursed to be born without a spirit, and she was given the burden of eternity. Not life, not death, but rebirth after rebirth, doomed to remember only fragments of what she had lost, and cursed that every man who loved her would die by nightfall of their union. The only way the curse could be broken was if she remembered who she truly was, before another man died. In each life she forgot, but in this one something was different. The madman, who now sat still like a statue, had not come from the road. He had come from the past. He was not a stranger, not truly. He was the spirit of the cursed child, the one born without a soul, doomed to wander through time until his mother remembered her sin and claimed him again. The bundle she placed before the elders held his bones, ancient, charred, and bound in silence for generations. She had carried them unknowingly, hidden in relics, buried in dreams. But the madman's presence stirred what was buried, and her memory returned, piece by painful piece. When she finished, the elders remained silent. The priest's daughter, who had been watching from behind her father's back, began to sob. The chief elder, whose first son had died years ago after courting Olama, fell to his knees. The madman stood slowly, as if the weight of centuries had finally lifted. His eyes, once clouded with madness, now held clarity sharp as blade. He looked at Olama not with rage or grief, but with release. That night, Olama lit a fire at the center of the village square. She placed the bundle within it, sang a lullaby no one had heard before, and let the flames consume the bones. The sky thundered once, and the earth trembled, but no one fled. As dawn broke, the madman vanished. No footprints, no farewell. Olama sat quietly beside the ashes, her eyes closed, her spirit still, and for the first time since her youth, she slept in peace. When dawn spread its golden fingers across the roofs of Ogboma, the village stirred with a strange stillness, not fear, not excitement, just silence, deep and thick, like the earth itself was holding its breath. In the center of the village square, where the sacred fire had burned all night, there remained only ash and a faint scent of something bittersweet, like the memory of rain after a long drought. Olama did not return to her compound that day. She remained seated on the edge of the ashes, her wrapper smeared with charcoal, her hair undone, her face lifted slightly toward the rising sun. The people, once quick to turn from her shadow, now watched with reverence. They didn't speak to her. They didn't ask questions. They only offered silence, the only gift fit for a woman who had carried pain that outlived memory. The madman, the spirit, the child, the curse, was gone. Some believed he had returned to the world of spirits, his task complete. Others whispered that he had simply walked back into the bush, free at last from the madness of being half alive for too long. Wherever he went, he left no trace, not even a footprint in the red dust, but Olama remained. In the days that followed, something shifted in Ugboma. The air was lighter. The animals stopped howling at the night. The children, who had once been kept from her path, now left small gifts by her gate. Fruits, beads, even drawings scrawled in the sand. They did not fully understand her story, but children often sense when a spirit has calmed. The elders, those who had once trembled at the thought of her touch, sent a delegation to speak with her, not to accuse, not to question, but to thank her for surviving what none of them could have endured. Olama did not weep. She simply nodded and returned to her garden. The flowers she planted there bloomed larger than they ever had before. Purple, gold, deep crimson. They seemed to respond to her presence as though they, too, had been waiting for the curse to lift. As the moons passed, the story spread beyond Ugboma. Travelers from neighboring villages came to see the woman who had once killed with her love and lived to bury the spirit of her son. Some came with fear, others with awe, but none left untouched. They returned home and told her story by firelight, of the woman who remembered what no other could, of the madman who wasn't mad, and of a love so ancient it bent time itself. But legends always change in the telling. Some versions painted Olama as a witch who had trapped the spirit of her lovers in a calabash. Others said she was a river goddess, cursed to walk the earth until a madman taught her to love herself again. A few claimed she had never been human at all, that she was a spirit in disguise, testing the hearts of mortal men. Olama herself never corrected them. She tended her home. She greeted children with a warm smile. And when the harmattan returned each year, she walked barefoot to the square, lit a small fire, and sat quietly beside it, eyes closed, humming that same lullaby the madman had danced to. No man ever came to court her again. Not out of fear, but out of respect. For who would dare offer marriage to a woman who had already loved beyond death, carried a spirit across lifetimes, and stood unmoved while the gods watched? Years later, when she finally passed away, it was said she died smiling. There was no illness, no struggle. She simply lay on her mat one morning, arms folded, breath still, peaceful. The village held a burial unlike any before. The elders declared her compound sacred. Women washed her body with river water and she oil. Children sang her name. And when she was laid to rest beneath the oji tree, the same tree where the madman once sat, flowers began to grow at the base before the first rain could fall. Some say that every dry season, if you walk past her resting place at night, you can hear two voices laughing, one deep, one light, as though mother and child have reunited beyond the veil. And if you stop, close your eyes, and listen carefully, you might just hear the beat of unseen drums and the soft hum of a lullaby older than time. Thus ended the story of Olama, the cursed bride, the eternal mother, the woman who lived beyond the reach of shame or sorrow. Not all legends are born of heroes. Some are born of those who carried the weight of the gods and still walked with grace.